Good evening. I have 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order, and please ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Greg David,
Present.
Mr. Tyler Dean,
Here.
Miss Emily Hamburg,
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Here.
And it appears that Mr. John Welch is absent. And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So this evening, we were going to have a minister to help us lead us in prayer, but apparently he did not make it. So we'll just call for a moment of silent prayer. Amen. So please join me in a pledge to the flag of American flag. Pledge allegiance to America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show that Mr. Welch did join us, so we'll continue the meeting. Are there any agenda additions to consider? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. So the consent agenda contains the minutes of the September 5th regular city council meeting and September 12th special city council meeting. Also, my appointment of Derek Faber to the planning commission. Derek is replacing Heath Trevicek, who resigned due to work schedule conflicts.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith,
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. David. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries 5-0. Item 7A is the appropriations ordinance. So this is a light reporting period considering which includes one payroll. Expenses were mainly operational expenditures. Utility maintenance contractors was paid $41,500 some dollars for 3 water line service installs, 53rd Street manhole rehab, and water main repair on Cozy, and a fire hydrant repair at 4041 North Woodlawn.
Mr. Mayor,
Amber,
can staff just clarify on the first page, the second line up from the bottom, it says TCS traffic control for $4,750, 53rd Street road closed and detour sign. My little taxpayer heart wants to believe that traffic signs didn't cost $4,750, but maybe they did, and maybe the description's just short. What all did that cover?
I don't know, but if I could look into that and get you an answer, be happy to do that.
Sounds good. I just know. Thanks, Di.
Yes, thank you.
any other questions or discussion on our appropriations ordinance? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean,
I'll motion to approve appropriations ordinance 23-17.
I'll second.
a motion by Mr. Dean and a second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion or additional questions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries 5-0. So city requested appearances, we have 2 this evening. So the first one is Ms. Sarah Laughlin from Allen, Gibbs, and Houlik. The city is required by state statute to complete a financial audit each year. So Allen, Gibbs, and Houlik is the company we contract for this service. And Tara Laughlin is here to present the 2022 City of Bel Aire financial audit. Ms. Laughlin.
Good evening.
As was mentioned, I'm here to kind of present the results of the city's fiscal year 2022 financial statement audit. Similar to years past, I'm going to go over the results, the required communications, that audit standards require that we discuss with those charged with governance. So my focus is going to be on the specific letter that was in your packet. Some of this stuff is similar language to prior years. So again, I'm going to focus on the aspects that are most applicable to this year. Quick introduction myself, Tara Laughlin. I'm a vice president at AGH in our government auditing practice. The scope of services we provide to the city is a financial statement audit. Within the financial statements, you will see our opinion. That's the only piece that's our work product. The rest comes from help from the city staff within the financial statements. I do want to thank Ted and Debbie and all the staff that help us throughout that process. We have to come in and bug them while they're trying to get their daily work done. So they're all very responsive to our needs and get the support we request timely to us. I want to point out that we did issue an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. So that means that the financials materially reflect the books and records of the city for fiscal year 2022, and information in that report can be relied upon. Now focusing on the specific required communications, towards the bottom of the first page is where we kind of talk about whether there is any accounting standard changes that might impact how items are accounted for within the financials from one year to the next. While there was a couple new standards this year effective for the city, they really weren't material for the city's activities. The biggest one of those standards was a new lease standard on how leases are accounted for, but through all of our detailed review of GL details and discussions with staff, there just wasn't material amounts there. So what that means is the information in this year's report compared to last year's report, if there's changes, it's really going to be because of a change in activity and not because things are accounted for differently. Towards the top of the second page, we discuss estimates that are included within the financials. Not all numbers can be hard, fast, known numbers. So there is some estimation involved. These estimates are the same as they have been the last several years. One relates to valuing land held for sale, and a lot of that did actually get sold in 22. So that's becoming a little bit smaller of a number. And then the other two are related to retirement type liabilities. One is the net pension liability, which is the city's share of the CAPER's overall net pension liability. And then the other is other post-employment benefit liability, and this stems from the CAPER's death and disability plan as well. Our responsibilities as it relates to estimates is to get an understanding of how management determines those estimates. We review inputs, outputs, calculations, make sure that they're in line with standards. And in all cases, we did find that the estimates were being reasonably done and within the accounting standards. The next item I like to highlight is audited adjustments and uncorrected misstatements. The audited adjustments listed here are similar to prior years. We've had this discussion in the past. So the financial statements, day-to-day internal financials are kind of kept on the budget statement, which helps the city stay in line with state statutory rules. When we come in at year end, generally accepted accounting principle statements are done. So almost all of these adjustments relate to converting from budget basis accounting to GAAP full accrual basis accounting. So all of these adjustments are similar to ones that we have done in prior years. And really it's focusing on that conversion from budget to GAAP basis financials. We did not have any uncorrected misstatements. What those would be is adjustments that we identified that didn't get reflected within the financials because it was determined to not be material or impact users. We did not have any of those. So all the adjustments that are listed here are reflected within the financial statements. On page 3, I just want to point out towards the top of page 3, it's kind of buried in one big paragraph, but again, we had no disagreements with management. They were all very helpful, quick in providing us support that we requested. And also on page 3, I just want to point this out because it's new to this year's letter compared to last year's. It's just some more detailed information on, the importance of us being independent of the city staff and issuing that independent audit. And how the rules are outlined to ensure that we do maintain our independence, which we did do throughout this audit process. On page 4, then, again, this is similar to what we've discussed in prior years as it relates to internal control matters. The first main matter that we discuss in our letter, again, is related to the budget to gap conversion process and financial reporting, because we do enter a lot of adjustments to do that conversion. There elevates a little bit of a risk there of a misstatement within the financial statements. Again, a lot of that is due to just the size of operations of the department. On page 5, we have listed out a few segregation of duties issues, and I want to highlight on these that towards the end of each bullet point, we have updated. The city has worked on putting some additional compensating controls in place over many of these issues. So we have updated what they did put in place. It's just it wasn't put in place at the beginning of the year. So a lot of these were put in place beginning fiscal year 23. So next year we will review that was actually done, but we have looked at those processes and controls that were added. So again, those were compensating controls. So, the segregation of duties issues are still there, but there's additional controls to mitigate the risk of those. So it's just always important that those compensating controls stay in place going forward. On the last page, again, is just some additional information. We always just kind of update and provide some information on just the cybersecurity risks and all the IT risks that are out there in the world today. And just, we always like to bring that up to all of our entities, those charged with governance, just to make sure that that's kind of on top of your mind, to make sure you're comfortable with what the city's doing in regards to cybersecurity matters. With that, I will open it up to any questions that you may have.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Laughlin? Okay, well, thank you for another good year report, and
Thank
we
you.
look forward to seeing you again next year.
Yes.
Mr. Henry, do
happy
you
to.
have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. Thank you, Tara. As you guys know, and with my report, a lot of our issues come from being me and Deb as our sole finance office, and many cities have the same type of smallness. The one difference is we are required to be on a GAAP basis with some of our CCUA bonds. So that's what we do. Ways that we're improving over the last probably 2 or 3 years, working with our auditors. What I do is I grab people from other departments and make them to cross-check. Ty signs off on a lot of different things. Melissa signs off on a lot of different things. So if you read my report, I go through all of those and say how we're trying to create a more cohesive or a better process for everybody. One area that we are looking at is municipal court. Right now, we employ a digital ticket system that imports all the, say, speeding tickets into our system and then runs it. So all that's automated. We have amending reports we can run, and we have waived reports we can run, but there's not a real master port I can run and look and give to somebody else and have them sign off. So that internal control issue might still linger to 2023, but the resolution on that, the main case is our current ERP system or our current financial books doesn't have kind of a master report that I'm able to print, and I'm working with them to maybe try to build one. But for now, I think we'll probably just do some sampling every quarter just to make sure, and we'll see how that goes. But I will say, we put out a RF or I call it a list of services where we're starting to take bids on a new ERP system. So hopefully that system will go by the wayside, and we can take off the municipal court one as well. So that's my plan for the 2023-2024 fiscal years.
Well, that's good news. I'm always glad to see us make progress on these deficiencies so we don't have glaring errors come up and come back and surprise us. That's not a good thing. So thank you very much for your diligence and efforts there. Move on to, unless there's any other questions or discussion on this issue, we'll move on to 45th Street report from Mr. Ken Lee with Garver to give us an update on 45th Street design.
Good evening, council. Do you know where the remote is? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. You guys have a new remote?
This is more than 40 feet.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Ken Lee with Garver. I was asked to come and give an update on some of our projects. It says 45th, but Ty asked me to go ahead and cover a few more that we have going on. So I'll run through those real quick. I'm going to start out with 53rd Street, all over the Woodlawn. As everybody knows, the road was converted to gravel here a short while back because it was becoming unsafe to travel on. And I know there's some dust issues, but I think the road itself is holding up pretty well. And from my observations, that asphalt millings that were mixed into the subgrade has made a pretty firm base underneath it. But where we are on the project is we have 100% not for construction plans. We're nearly done with them. We're printing them out and doing some final QA/QC. They'll be turned in the next few days. And the changes to that is the 10-foot bike path. We didn't have a sidewalk, and then we put a 6-foot sidewalk, and then we got funding to do a 10-foot sidewalk. So we had to redesign it for that. So the plans are set up for the sidewalk, but the sidewalk itself won't be part of the plans. So those are nearly done. The utility relocation is ongoing. I'll cover a little bit more on that on the next slide. We don't have a specific clear date set yet. City is nearing completion of right-of-way acquisition. We're planning on having this project go out to bid sometime in October, with it bidding in November and construction starting in the early spring. We'll probably give a fairly long window for the contractors to start with the winter time. Hopefully they'll get some better prices for the city, but the goal is to have it done before the end of next year. There's a concrete add alternate that we're going to include as an option in the project. We aren't going to do specific joint plans or anything like that. We'll work with, if it ends up being the price is appropriate to choose it, we'll work with the contractor to develop a joint plan for it at the time. And then also we'll have another additional add alternate for putting a 3-inch surface course and doing some ditch grading on 53rd between Woodlawn and Rock. That road has a few issues with it, and we want to, while we're doing the other work, if we're doing work right next door, is just see price wise if it makes sense. It'll be add alternate, so there won't be any obligation on the part of the city. Utility coordination. Lumen has got their plans put together, but they haven't been able to do their relocation yet. There's one piece of property that is still being closed on, and I think it's on the agenda tonight for approval. So they'll be getting started soon. AT&T has been in the process of doing their relocations, and they should be done. They said they'll be done by November. Cox only had one fiber service to one home that they're relocating, and I believe that's done. Evergy has relocated their poles. I haven't gone out there in the last week to see if they have the new wire ran on them yet, but they had the new poles up a couple of weeks ago. And then those are the only utilities that are scheduled for relocation. Just briefly talking about the right-of-way acquisition. At the far left edge in the light blue, number 1, that's the parcel that's still being acquired, and that's on the agenda tonight. Parcels 2 and 3 that are in the bottom middle, those are acquired, and the relocations have been done in that area. Parcel 4 is a drainage easement, and that one has actually been removed from the consideration. We at the city's request, we looked at redesigning the pipe, shortening it up a little bit, revising the riprap. We were only going a few feet into the property anyway, and rather than spend the money going through a contentious drainage easement acquisition, we've redesigned it. So item number 4 is no longer required. Items 5 and 6, we're meeting with the property owner in the next week or so to do some final discussions. They're on board with it. They're asking us to construct a berm and do some other work to kind of limit water from coming onto their property. So we're incorporating that into the plans, but that'll be done soon. I mentioned the multi-use path. The city did receive a grant. We met with Matthew Graham with KDOT via Teams. Ann and I did to talk to him about the process. And because it's a KDOT process, he said that we need to budget 18 months to get a project done that's basically already designed, but just the way their process works and going through their field checks and office check and PS&E and everything that we'll have to go through on the project. It's a fairly lengthy process, but it's prepped to go, and we'll be working on that in the next year or so. So that's the real quick run through on 53rd Street where we're at on that. Talking about 45th Street design, kind of at the bottom left of the picture. the bridge, it's a bridge, but it's not really a bridge. It's just three pipes under the roadway. The city received a grant for replacing that. So we're still going to do the design on that, but it'll actually be technically a separate project from 45th and Woodlawn, or 45th now, but it'll still get done, and we'll be working on that parallel with everything else, so that you can see it on the bottom left corner of the screen. That's going to be done separately. As we discussed it when we were talking about the concept, we did shift the alignment south at the east end of the project, so we don't need to remove those existing concrete screen walls. We do recommend the city work with the HOA to get some kind of an encroachment agreement. So because it's in the city right away, if somebody were to hit that wall, you want to make sure they're the ones responsible for it. So I think there needs to be an encroachment agreement if that wall is going to be allowed to remain in place. And then we've been working on the plans on the eastern 3/4 of the project. We're still waiting for the traffic counts on to be able to determine what we're going to do with the intersection. Speaking of traffic counts, you're going to hear more about this in a bit, but this is a graphic that shows the traffic counts that we're proposing with the project. With Woodlawn being worked on based on some decisions that are made in the past couple of weeks, we were going to do traffic counts at the beginning of October and just kind of hold our nose and make the best we could do of it. But since the road is going to be finished, we're probably going to wait until probably first week of November to do the traffic counts, and we'll get better, more accurate counts by doing that, because the road will have a couple weeks to operate as a true 3-lane road without a bunch of barrels and other interference that might keep people from using it. So this map kind of shows the traffic counts, and our time frame is in flux a little bit because of that. But looking at next steps, we're still working on a web page that we're going to put together for public information and feedback. It'll have information about the project. There'll be a interactive map for people to leave notes on it. And then that'll be used as part of evaluating choices on the project. Again, the traffic counts will be scheduled after Woodlawn reopens. We're hoping to have these done in time where we can do public meetings in maybe December. We'll leave it to city staff and council we'll work with you guys on that, on when's the best time. But we'll need to get the counts. We'll need a few weeks to get everything processed to come up with recommendations. But that's what we're kind of looking at. We're still planning on field check plans to be finished in early 2024 and turned into KDOT. So we're not expecting any change in schedule based on that. Jumping over to Cozy Drive, the preliminary plans have been reviewed for a while back. One of the big challenges we had is underneath the cul-de-sac, there's a couple pipes, and just getting the grade to work because of the size of pipes required. We weren't able to get curb and gutter under the roadway there and have the pipes. We just couldn't get it to work. So what we're actually going to do is just west of the pipes, we're actually going to put in a trench drain across the road to allow us to raise the road back up and cover those pipes up. And we're recommending a trench drain rather than a valley gutter, because valley gutter, you end up with water sitting on the road. There's a possibility for ice and just trash accumulating on the road in the valley gutter. So the trench drain will allow the water to go underground and not sit there on top. So we're nearly done with that, and those plans will be turned in next week for final review. And then Aurora Park, the blue on the screen there, that's the paving petition portion of the project, and those plans are complete and ready for final review by Ann. But based on some feedback received from the Gravel Roads Task Force, Ty asked us to prepare an ad alternate that would include regrading and replacing culverts as called out by the ditch study. And so we're in the process of that, incorporating into our plans as an ad alternate. Again, those would be optional items. If the prices stink, if it's going to give the people who live there an opportunity to decide this is the real world cost, it'll give the city an opportunity to look at it and say, do we want to do anything with it? Since we're already going to have contractors looking at it, it was decided that it'd be a good time to at least get a good price on it. So that's scheduled to be done in the next couple weeks. And with that, that's kind of a quick breeze through. I'll take any questions you might have.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. On 53rd Street, is there any possibility we can put a date that needs to be completed by opening of school next year? Is that too aggressive?
I I can talk to Ann and some other folks about it as far as establishing the dates on that. August 15th is probably pretty early because I think that's when school would be starting, is middle August.
About then.
That's maybe a little aggressive, but we can look at that and kind of discuss what an appropriate schedule is. The catch is if the earlier you go, the more likely you are to have contractor budget in penalty days. That's the only catch.
Okay.
Because I mean, if you say it's $1,000 a day and they're like, well, we're going to go 20 days past, they're just going to add $20,000.
Okay.
So
I appreciate that. On Aurora Park, when we originally did those paving petitions, we said that the city would share the cost of fixing the ditches. And it sounds like now we're kind of in flux on that. What's happening?
So the city is kicking in $600,000, I think it was, and I'm not sure of the number, but the city is kicking in a percentage of the price. Maybe it was overall on all the projects. The city did kick in a percentage of the price based on drainage improvements that hadn't been done before. So yeah, the petitions are, a portion of those petitions are being covered by the city. So that is true. However, that did not include the whole addition. That was only for the area of the petition project.
Right. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So, but yes, you are correct that the city is paying a portion of that petition for the drainage in that area.
Okay.
The ad alternate would be for the remaining area.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
just to
Dutty?
further clarify that point, so you're saying that the ad alternate is for areas that will not be paved?
Correct.
Okay, just double checking.
I've got a question.
Mr. Welch.
Maybe kind of late to the game here, but based on traffic studies, when we finally get them, do you think it might be a feasible thing to just rip out the asphalt on the east half mile of 45th and replace it rather than doing the full-blown construction project?
So you're asking just where the area, where the pavement is in poor condition, could it be just repaved there? Boy, that just depends on what you're trying to plan for. I mean, you always have that option to do that.
I'm thinking about our luck with Woodlawn and what the total cost is going to be if we do the full-blown project you're proposing, whether or not it's worth that kind of money.
Yeah, and I know that Ty has asked me to come up with a revised estimate for 45th Street to go ahead and get that done sooner than later to see where that's at. And we're not far enough on our design to give an item by item breakdown yet, but we are going to be looking at putting together a revised estimate.
Right. Well, I think everybody would agree the base is probably fine. It's just the asphalt that's shot in that east half.
Yeah.
We haven't seen the road move. We're just seeing the asphalt break up. So if we ripped it out and put in new asphalt, that would be a considerable savings in money, but I don't know if that's a good savings or a bad savings. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the project was put out for funding for a reason, because it does need it. It would be a better user experience to have the road replaced. Again, it's a choice as far as those type of things go. And I can't, we could certainly see what the traffic study says as far as what the vehicle count is for a 2-lane road to see if it really needs 3 lanes. And that isn't a conversation we've had at this point, but that's something we could always look at. But again, you're paying to provide a better road that provides safer environment for your users is the whole point of upgrading the roadway. As far as the saving money, that's always an option.
Yeah, but we're essentially ending up with a 2-lane road, whichever way we go. So that's some safety features is what we're adding in. And I don't know if it's worth that at this point. And I want to say that before we get so far down that we can't back up.
I understand.
Any other questions?
Mr.
Ms.
Mayor,
Sandberg?
on 53rd Street, even with that tight timing in August, and it will probably go the full construction year, you had mentioned that we should be able to work with the contractor so that we can work with school traffic to maybe keep 53rd Street open, headed east, and not have it totally shut down.
Yeah, so we'll work with them on construction phasing. One of the ideas that we do have is it depending on when the timing is is to shut down a complete portion of it all at once to allow them to go more quickly. But if the determination is to keep it one lane eastbound all the way through construction, that's certainly very achievable without any big problem. We would just, my expectation is we would carry traffic on the north side and do the south side first, because that's where the largest widening is going. And then when we get to the second phase, you'll have a much wider road surface for people to operate on in phase two. So we can certainly keep it open without any problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Lee? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all the good information. Didn't expect so much. So. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. For the purpose of this hearing is to hear any and all written or oral objections to the respective assessments considered in the ordinance levying special assessments on the agenda. So I will now open the public hearing concerning special assessment. So City Clerk, are there any written comments?
No, ma'am, we did not receive any written comments.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have one card from a citizen who would like to speak about the special assessments. So I'll ask Ms. Kelly Welch. I think it's Miss, may be Mr. Kelly Welch. Okay, well, Kelly's one of those names and we never know for sure, but thank you. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and speak in the microphone. I appreciate it. If you give us your name and your address, that would be very helpful.
My name is Mr. Kelly Welch. I live at 7364 East Pheasant Ridge Street right here in Central Park. I just have a couple statements and a couple of questions. I'm sitting at home the other day and I get a letter that says, you're going to owe us $22,000 for living here. I just moved here from Washington where our property tax was $4,000 a year. And we moved to Kansas, which is a substantially cheaper state to live in, and our property taxes are still $4,000 a year. So that's my statement. My question is, why is my $4,000 a year not paying for the improvements we're going to make? What is that being used for? And specifically, what is this $22,000 that I'm supposed to pay going to be used for?
Okay. Well, thank you. And I think we can answer those questions fairly quickly. Would you be the right person, or would it be better to ask our bond attorney?
Sure, I can answer that, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the special assessments are kind of unique to Kansas and even specifically South Central Kansas. You get up to the Olathe and Northeast area. They don't do special assessments up there either. So really special assessments were kind of designed for as developer friendly. So in other words, when a developer puts in a subdivision, the roads, water, sewer, main, storm systems have to be paid for. And so in Kansas, or in South Central Kansas, we do what's called special assessments. So those costs are put on as a annual fee to pay off that debt service and those infrastructure. In other states and even in Northeast Kansas, what they do is they require the developer to pay all those up front, so there's no special assessments. But then when the developer sells that lot, they tack the cost of those special assessments or those improvements onto the cost of the lot. So that's why here in South Central Kansas, you can buy a new lot for $30,000. But then there are special assessments. If you go to Johnson County and buy a lot, you're spending $60,000 or $70,000 for that lot because the developer just tags it on to the price of the lot instead of doing special assessments. So that's why it is, especially someone that's not from the South Central Kansas, and we have businesses the same way, like in our Commerce Park, businesses will come in from other states and not understand what special assessments are. But that's what they're for is, and that's where you should see a difference is the same size of lot here in Bel Aire is going to run $30,000 or whatever that price is. And then if you go to Johnson County, it's going to be double that because it's added on to cost of the lot. It is, though, you would think that, well, is there a benefit financially to the homeowner? And there is. For example, when the city does these special assessments, so it's paid out over 20 years, well, we get an interest rate of probably 1.5% on those, where if you're going to borrow the money and add the cost of your lot into your home loan, you're going to do a 30-year and maybe be at what I think they're at 6% now. So there is some actual savings by the city bonding that out and spreading those specials than having it tied into the cost of your house. So, but that's the difference. And that's why I'm sure this gentleman coming from a different state and they don't do those, it does seem different. And it's even different in Kansas.
Okay, thank you. Does that help answer your question, sir? Please come to the podium because this is recorded and it's broadcast, so.
Okay, so the second part of my question is, what is my $4,000 a year currently being used for? And what are we going to do with the $22,000 you want from me in the future for those improvements?
So the 22,000 special assessment, that's paying for all the infrastructure improvements that serve your house. So the water main, the sewer main, the storm sewer system, the streets, that's to pay that share. Now, the positive thing about that is there's initial cost up front, but the city now has to maintain those from today or the day they were put in on. So if they have to be torn out and replaced, the city at large has to pay for that. If they have to be a mill and overlay, the city pays for that. So any kind of future costs, the city has to pay for those. So that's the special assessment part. The general taxes, it pays for parks, it pays for the pool. You're close to the pool here. Police, all the code enforcement, all the different things that the city does in general, that's where your taxes pay for those. Yeah. Oh, and I've got our finance guy. The one thing to keep in mind too is that $4,000 that you're paying, 30% of that roughly is coming to the city. So the rest of it's going to the county, to the school district, to the fire district. So as far as that 30% of that 4,000 that goes to the city is paying for police and the things that I mentioned.
Okay. You've answered my question. I can't imagine how the people who owe $56,000 on this feel, but if I get a vote, I'm against it.
Thank you, sir. All right. Are there any other citizens who are affected by the special assessment that wish to speak to the council? Very good. If none, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Hamburg.
make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
A motion by Ms. Hamburg, was a second by Mr. David. Yes. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. We'll move on to citizens' concerns, and this is not related to special assessments, but other concerns citizens may have. And I do have a request from Ms. Carol Russell to speak. So, Ms. Russell, if you would come to the podium and state your name and address, and we will give you 3 minutes to speak.
Sure, thank you. My name is Carol Russell. I live at 6218 East 45th Street North. What I'd like to talk about is item C on the agenda. When I was reading over Garver's project, I was wondering, since we had so much trouble with Woodlawn, like with the adjustments with the money and everything, why would we okay this statement? It says that they weren't, these were just suggestions. The things that you guys are reading and making decisions on, they were suggestions. And we had talked about this before on Woodlawn, all the adjustments, all the, I'll say changes, all the adjustments that happened things that were not quite right and we tried to fix with extra money. I'd like to know, why would we vote for this next project 21T41285 document? Why would we do that? Why would we give them an open budget?
So just to clarify, is this the project that's being developed to the east and north of your property? Is that the one
Yeah,
you're talking
it
about?
has something to do with that also, yes.
Okay, because that's a private developer doing that. That's a private developer doing that. It's not the city doing that. It's a private developer.
This
There-
is an agreement between the city and it's in the packet.
Yeah, I understand. So just like we just had the public hearing on special assessments, okay?
Mhm.
So this is the other side of the special assessments. This is the early part. This is where the developer comes and says, I want to do these things.
Mhm.
And I need to put sewer, I need to put storm sewer, I need water, I need roads, I need all that. And he's saying, here's my plans to do this. And if you approve that, then later on, a few years down the road, we will come back and special assess that property for all that activity because it'll all be a private developer doing it. It's different than a public structure like Woodlawn is a public, it's a thoroughfare. So the city at large pays everything for the Woodlawn project. We facilitate the private developer in his process, but we're not fully responsible for that. We take over responsibility after it's all done for maintenance, but we don't finance or design the project.
Okay, and I look forward to the statement where it says they will notify the adjacent property owners concerning construction operations. I look forward to that because that has not happened in the past.
Okay.
Thank you for your
They
time
should
today.
do that. Thank you. Any other citizens who would like to speak to council this evening? Hearing none, I'll move on to council member reports. Ms. Hamburg, do you have a report this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Thursday evening, I attended the Planning Commission meeting. I won't comment on the specifics until if and when that gets to us. I would say I think we did make the right decision in the budget for giving them a small stipend each month for their service. Saturday, soccer games kicked off. You saw in the packet that had a record number of players. Appreciate all the volunteer coaches and rec staff for that great program. Continue to support the Lions Club at the concession stands each Thursday or each Saturday morning there. And then I just wanted to comment. Thursday evening, there were two separate incidents on 53rd Street. Wrecks. Thank goodness there were no injuries, but they were both driver error. But I noticed in some Facebook groups and social media that people first of all thought that those wrecks were a result of the gravel road, and as Mr. Lee commented, there are some dust issues, but the road is significantly better. We don't have people down the middle where we're going to have a head-on crash dodging potholes. It was tax effective. It was a good deal to turn that back into a gravel road until we can do the rebuild. But some people were under the impression that that was our final stop in this process. And I just want to say that we know there's a bunch of growth there and we are not leaving it a gravel road. It was meant to accommodate people that needed to keep that open until we do the full rebuild, hopefully next year. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Welch.
I have no comment.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
I have no report.
Mr. David.
No report, thank you.
Mr. Dean.
Mr. Mayor, I have a few items. Earlier this month, I attended the Bel Aire Chamber lunch. Again, continuing to see attendance grow there and membership growth. So I wanted to thank Gary O'Neill and the rest of the folks at the Bel Aire Chamber for continuing to do their work. I think it's really paying off, and I appreciate all they do. Today, I actually attended the Bel Aire storage ribbon cutting. The Bel Aire Chamber helped host that along with Andrew Reese and his team. I wanted to thank them and their team as they continue to invest in and get involved in our community and help it grow. And then the last thing I was going to mention is just some reminders, and Ty might also say this, the Fall Festival is coming up. on 10/21. So be on the lookout if you haven't already seen that flyer running around. And then also today is National Voter Registration Day. So just a reminder to everybody to get registered to vote because elections are right around the corner. That's all I have.
So I think voter registration has to be in about the middle of October, but I'm not sure of the exact date, but it's coming up. So, okay, thank you for the reminder. All right, move on to mayor's report. So in anticipation of Integra coming to Bel Aire and recognizing additional possibly overwhelming amount of work that will be placed on city staff, the city has solicited requests for qualifications from several firms to assist staff in the required oversight for the numerous city improvements as an owner's representative. The concept is that this company and the people assigned by that company will work with our city team to ensure the many projects related to growth and Integra will be tracked, managed, and inspected. This can be infrastructure, building codes, building inspections, and plan reviews. An assigned person would actually office in the city for roughly 20 hours per week. These proposals are due September 28th. Ty and I have discussed the idea of a review committee consisting of 2 city council members, 2 staff people, and myself for the purpose of reviewing, interviewing, and making recommendations on the firm that we think will best serve the city's need. Time is short. We are hoping that Integra will receive CHIPS funding award announcement in October. Of course, that's up to the Department of Commerce as to when and whom the awards will be made. As we have said before, if Integra gets this award, we need to be ready to rock and roll from day one. APEX funding requires Integra to have shovel in the ground this year. So Integra's target is to have an operational facility within 2 years. So I'm asking any city council member that would be interested in participating in this committee to let me know as soon as possible so that we can set up a time the first week in October to meet and discuss proposals. Due to COMA requirements, we need to limit the city council participation to this committee to 2 members. And of course, we'll make a recommendation to the city council from there. And I'm not asking for that right now, but think about that. And if you'd like to do it, just let me know, okay? On September 6th, I attended the Bel Aire Chamber of Commerce along with City Council Member Tyler Dean. Keith Lawing from the Workforce Alignments gave a presentation about issues with developing needs for worker skills. In today's environment, that is more, there are more jobs and people to fill them. He has seen that the other way around, or more people than there are jobs. There are multiple fronts that are being worked to fill the void. So on September 9th, I attended the Sedgwick County Association of Cities. There were only 9 cities in attendance, so 10 are required for a quorum, so no action was taken there. But they did talk about a small presentation and discussion about city clerks and municipal finance officers association. It appears that SCAC would like to fund some scholarships for Sedgwick County city clerks and utility clerks to attend their academy, working towards master city clerks designation. The funds for this scholarship are excess funds that were being used to pay for the executive director. With the recent changes, Sedgwick County is now providing that position, so the annual dues were reduced, and this one option for use of some of these excess funds. Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell gave a good presentation on unfunded transfers that the state by law is supposed to transfer to cities and counties. These funds are the local aid valorem property tax reduction, which is abbreviated LAVTRF, the county city revenue sharing CCRS, and the special city county highway fund, the SCCHF. 2 of these funds have not been funded since 2004 and one since 2009. The estimates of these funds to cities and counties is a loss of about $3.4 billion over the 20-year history of non-funding. So the state currently has about $4 billion in excess funds. So there's an effort in the state legislature to cancel the statutes that authorize these programs. We think the state would be much wiser to restart the funding these programs. And they would do that in 2024. We can plan property tax mill levy reduction for 2025's budget. We know there is a desire in the legislature to provide tax relief. So this is a mechanism already in law. So they just need to fund the programs. I have met with Representative Patrick Penn and State Senate President Ty Masterson about this idea. We need citizens to start talking with their state legislatures that we need the state to fund these programs for property tax relief. Senator McGinn was at the SCAC meeting. She is supportive of the funds for these programs. On Monday, September 11th, the Americans for Prosperity posted on Facebook that between 1998 and 2003, the last 5 years of the LAVTRF funding, property taxes increased 7.9%. I looked up the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics who show that inflation that same period was 14%. So it did not appear that AFP's analysis took inflation into account. It looks like property taxes are actually reduced 6.1% over that same time period when adjusted for inflation. So I asked AFP to help us understand how this works. Thus far, I've not seen a response from them. On Tuesday, September 12th, I attended the WAMPO Policy Board meeting. They are looking for folks to help on a couple of committees. The first was the Intelligent Transport Systems Plan Update Process and Steering Committee. This committee is looking to how to use technology to improve traffic flow, things like coordination of traffic lights, etc. A second is a Regional Transportation Implementation Plan Update and Steering Committee. While the ITS is important, that was the earlier committee, this committee may have more impact on Bel Aire. It is basically looking at Wichita Transit System and expanding it to a regional system. There is money in the bill, that's the bipartisan infrastructure law, for this type of project. And bringing bus service to Bel Aire and other communities in the Wichita metro area allows people more flexibility to work in Bel Aire. It gives those who cannot afford an automobile a transportation option. We have businesses in Bel Aire that would like to have such service, but when we talked about this with the director of Wichita Transit, the price tag was just beyond our reach. So maybe this regional plan will resolve that. So if anybody would be interested in serving on that committee, there is opportunity there, and please get with me and I can tell you how to get involved in that. On Wednesday, September 13th, I attended the Utility Advisory Committee meeting. I've asked them to review the PEC's proposal plan for future water and wastewater treatment. We should use their input to help guide us in making the best decision for Bel Aire. Of course, PEC is still working on making a more finite proposal, and having UAC to get involved in this earlier allows them to digest the information and assist them in making recommendations to the City Council. So this afternoon, I also attended the ribbon cutting ceremony for Bel Aire Secured Storage on Webb Road. This facility incorporates some pretty cool technology for storage facility. It also has areas for RV and boat storage for those that need that option. And on Saturday, September 30th, Church of the Resurrection on Woodlawn is holding their annual parish picnic. This is a community event, so all are welcome to attend. Dinner is at 5:15, bingo at 6 p.m., softball championship at 7 p.m., and dancing at 8 p.m. This is a potluck event, side dishes and desserts only. Hamburgers and drinks are provided. So RSVPs are appreciated by calling 744-2776. And please continue to support businesses along Woodlawn during the construction. Things are moving along, but we still have another month of this to endure. So I'll now ask our city attorney for her report.
Thank you, Mayor Benaj. I was going to give a brief update on the SAFER Coalition. For those of you that don't know, SAFER is an acronym. It is Streetlights Alliance for Fair Energy Rates. SAFER represents multiple cities across the state of Kansas with one concern, and that concern is about the high cost of electricity to power streetlights. Studies have shown that streetlights are a very unique and very helpful resource. They help cities, municipalities reduce crime, also reduce traffic accidents. The city of Bel Aire joined the SAFER Coalition, and they also we entered into representation of Fulton Siefken, who filed a petition on our behalf. They filed it with the Kansas Corporation Commission, and more recently, there was testimony provided to the KCC at the end of August. I went through that testimony and found a couple of points that I wanted to mention to all of you. One specific contention was that energy charges, the charges are 587% to 1,004% higher than the costs incurred for that specific service. I was surprised about that fact. There was also a similarity drawn between streetlights and electric vehicles. It appears as though streetlights are used at night and a majority of electric vehicles are charged at night. What the testimony showed was that cities are charged up to nearly 600% more for the service of our streetlights at night compared to what electrical vehicles are used. The arguments by SAFER are simply that the rates are unjust, they are not reasonable for our specific municipal class. They want to promote the public service, that cities should be allowed to have streetlights, and that the charges should be reduced to cost-based levels. If those costs were reduced to cost-based levels, the utility bills for municipalities across the state would be much less. I want you all to know as well, if you want to make comments, the Kansas Corporation Commission is still accepting those comments. You can go to their website, you can go to their, you can respond by mail. The final date for comments is September 29 of this year. But Folston and Siefken, I want to say thank you. They're doing a great job for the coalition and for the city of Bel Aire. They're keeping us updated. They're sending us notes. And if we want to participate, they're willing to tell us how. So if you have any questions, let me know. But I just wanted to give a brief update as to that movement.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate the information. Mr. Tyler Lasher, our city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. So the summer is typically pretty busy for our utility department, May through August. Have a lot of people moving in and out, as you could imagine, a good time to move. And just to give you some numbers, we are up 49% over the same period from 2022 to 2023. That's how much our growth and the activities are occurring as Bel Aire continues to add new homes. As far as numbers, our total work orders, which work orders are, turning on and off people, checks for leaks and things like that. Total for 2022 were 458 of those. And to date, for 2023, we've had 771. So that's almost a 50% increase. So just to give you some numbers of how growth affects our staff and what keeps them busy during the summer, it's a lot of the people moving in and out. As far as a street update, I wanted to let everybody know that Vance Brothers is expected to start the scrub seal portion of Oliver next Monday. So it's a kind of a two-part process. They do the scrub seal, and it takes about a week to complete, and then they come back and then they put a microsurface over the top of that, and they'll do that sometime around October 23rd, and that lasts about 8 days. But while they're doing this, there'll be flaggers and some pilot cars to get people back and forth, so there'll be a bit of an inconvenience, but that'll be happening in October. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate the information. All right. Moving on to item 12A. So this is an ordinance on levying special assessments. So the city completed a number of projects as requested, and those public improvements have been financed through temporary bank notes. We are now ready to move those projects to permanent gold bonds financing and spread the cost of special assessments to the benefiting lots. Kevin Cowan with Gilmore & Bell is here to identify the projects and explain our actions and answer any questions. Mr. Cowan.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. This is the continuation of what we discussed at the last meeting, and even going back further than that. It's a process that started 3+ years ago with the submission of petitions by property owners requesting these various public improvements. City then adopted resolutions authorizing improvements, establishing methods of assessment, recorded those resolutions of record to provide notice to potential property owners that the property is subject to special assessments. As was referenced, temporary notes were issued to finance the improvements, and we are approaching the maturity of those notes. And so it is time to complete this assessment process. So we had the hearing. This ordinance would take what was approved at the last meeting as the proposed assessment rule for the various resolutions, approve that, make it final. And notice, if passed, notice will then be given to property owners once again as to what the final assessment is, and advise them that the assessments can be paid in full or in part within the next 15 days. And if not, the amounts that are unpaid will become part of the city's general obligation bond issue. Interest will be added to the assessments at the rate that the city achieves on its bond sale, and those will be collected over 20 years. So that's kind of start to finish, or start to this point in the assessment process. After the 15-day prepayment period that I referenced, then there will be enough information for the city to know exactly what the size of the bond issue should be to retire the temporary notes, taking into account any prepayments. And the process will move into the sale of bonds starting next month, with a sale and then a closing by the end of November. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cowan?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. David?
so when those notices go out, are they given some idea of what that interest rate might be so they can decide between prepayment versus assessment?
Not typically, partially because it's speculative. I think, and I'll volunteer Ted maybe a little bit. I know that sometimes calls are made and estimates are made as to what that interest rate will be. It varies. Mr. Lasher referenced 1.5%. Interest rates are up. It may not be that low, but maybe in the 3% plus range as we speak. But even between now and the bond sale, which would occur in early November, that could change a little bit.
I might add, it's very rare someone comes in and prepay, but they'll usually get me and I'll discuss it. A lot of times, because these are special assessments, it's carried with the property. So if you're not going to be there for the next 20 years, it's important to consider as well, because if you sell it, that special assessment stays with the property. It doesn't, the value you get, you could try to negotiate with the new buyer, but that's another consideration we talk about as well. So we're very forward in what that choice is.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Amber.
since you're here, I was just curious, when we bought our house, we had a few years of assessments left, but it was only over 10 years. Has the standard gone to 20 years because of interest rates or inflation, or?
Maybe a little bit of both. And it's anecdotal what I see.
Yeah.
Not only in Bel Aire, but other communities. And it is pretty standard, 20 years. Some of it's competition with home builders and developers. In one place they're doing 20 years, which lowers the annual or monthly amount that would be set aside for that. There was a time when the city amortized street projects over a little shorter period of time, thinking we may be maintaining those streets, maybe heavy maintenance before the end of 20 years. So maybe try to align that. But I think there has been pressure, as you say, inflation and other pressures, and competing with other communities, and what are the special assessments for a new home in Bel Aire versus special assessments in another community. And that's driven part of it, maybe a large part of it.
Any other questions or discussion concerning these assessments? Well, I appreciate the information. Thank you for the
I
short
will add, I
review.
should have mentioned this a moment ago. 20 years is the maximum. So unless there's a statutory change, it's not going to be more than 20 years. 20 installments collected over not more than 22 years, depending on where you are in the budget or tax cycle. So just wanted to add that.
I thought there was discussion in legislation to expand that to 30 years, but I don't know where that went. Apparently it didn't pass, so.
Yeah, not the same thing, but KDHE loans had now can be for
Maybe that's
30
why
years
it's
instead of
confusing.
20 years. And so
Yeah.
who knows, there may be further discussion. And again, it just lowers the amount of an annual or monthly payment if you amortize for a longer period of time, but increases your interest cost.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the information. Any other questions or discussions concerning this ordinance, levying special assessments?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith,
I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance levying special assessments, including benefit fees on certain property to pay the cost of internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, as heretofore authorized by resolution numbers R-20-01, R-20-02, R-20-03, R-20-04, R-20-05, R-20-06, R-20-07, R-20-12, R-2013, and R-2014, and providing for the collection of such special assessments and benefit fees and authorizing the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. David. Any additional questions or discussions? This is a roll call vote, so I'll ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Greg David,
Aye.
Mr. Tyler Dean,
Aye.
Miss Emily Hamburg,
Aye.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Aye.
and Mr. John Welch.
Aye.
And the motion carries 5-0, Mayor.
Thank you. We're on to item B, ordinance. So this is a proposal for traffic group for 24-hour vehicle classification. So in order to identify traffic trends and determine the best design for ingress, egress, and intersections at 45th between and including Woodlawn to Oliver, Garver is proposing traffic group for the study. And Mr. Ken Lee talked about this earlier in the meeting a little bit. He alluded to it. So representatives from the traffic group and Garver are here to explain their work and answer any questions. Is somebody from the traffic group here?
I don't know that we have anybody from the traffic group today.
They didn't
so
make
no.
it? Okay.
So I'll
Okay.
take any
So you're-
questions.
You're
on
going
it.
to talk, you're going to take the questions. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll mention that when the project was awarded to Garver, this was a line item that was included as an expected cost. It's the same cost that was expected at the time of the selection for the project. So this was something that was already budgeted in the past and planned for.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Hamburg.
I know it's ultimately our decision, but can you kind of give us your opinion on those nice to haves, if we should include those or not?
So the proposal was broken into two pieces that I think you saw there. There's the main part, which are the really you need to haves, which are evaluating the primary intersections and the major intersections that we're expecting to have deceleration lanes. We've done some preliminary design on the deceleration lanes, but we need to verify that the links and the locations are appropriate. The nice to haves is that second group where those are areas that we seat of the pants. We didn't think we needed to have any turn bays or anything, but if you get those studied, it might reveal that some of those have enough traffic to warrant some additional turn lanes. And then one of the intersections that was off of Oliver is more just kind of evaluating just overall traffic patterns in the area. The Oliver and Westlake one was one where it just gives you more information on how people are getting into and out of the neighborhoods. So does that cover that adequately?
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Why 24 hours? That seems like a short period to measure.
They're actually going to do it for a week. It just means 24 hours a day for a whole week. So
Okay.
this will be for an entire week. It's just meaning that they'll run 24 hours a day. They have video cameras that they'll track pedestrians, trucks. It'll actually classify the different vehicles, the turning movements. And it captures pedestrian and other movements too.
Okay, the document that they sent us said it was going to do it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, which made me think that they were only going to do it for one day on one of those days, which...
Okay, I'll need to double check that. I was under the impression that we were taking it for a longer period. So I need
A single day just seems like a really small sample size of data to collect if you're going to go set all
Yeah,
that stuff
it-
up.
And my impression was that this was going to be for a longer period, and that could be just the write-up didn't explain that very well. But my expectation is that it's more than just one day.
That was my initial expectation as well. But then, Mr. Smith, I do totally see where you're coming from because I was kind of questioning that as well. And figure Ken and his group know what they need to have.
Yeah.
So, but
Well,
yeah, I would appreciate it if they could double check that
yeah,
for
and
us.
it may be with the stuff that's going on at Woodlawn. If you want, it may be appropriate to table this item so I can get you clarity on that. So,
Because
said,
if that's not what they intend to do, you would want to revise the scope of work.
yeah, I was thinking it was more than just one 24-hour period. So I need to get clarity on that as well. So that's sometimes when you're communicating through emails, sometimes you don't get the same information. So it may be appropriate to table this so I can have more discussions with our group, because I was under the impression it would be longer than that. So
So I do have a question about Glendale and as it wraps around to 44th Street, because I see a lot of traffic, especially in the morning, divert from 45th Street to Glendale and then wrap around to 44th Street to get onto Oliver. Are you any consideration about capturing that divergence of traffic?
we talked about that, and I know there's been an uptick of that because of the construction activities going on, that there have been more cars bypassing that. I may know a guy who goes home sometimes and does that. Can't say for sure who, but there's a possibility. So I think there has been an increase in that because of the diversion of Woodlawn traffic. So that's why we didn't include that one. Is we think that's more of a short-term trend rather than a longer-term trend. But I know that it does happen, particularly at the peak hour.
I've seen it happen for several years, so I
Yeah,
don't think
and
it's just a recent event, but you may be right. It may be higher.
I think it's
more
worse
frequent
now, but yeah, that's a good question though.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Lee?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean?
I'll motion to table the quote from Traffic Group in the amount of $14,800 for 24-hour video vehicle classification, turning movement counts at various intersections for 45th and Oliver to Woodlawn street reconstruction project for Ken to. I'm not going to finish that because I'm not going to have the mayor execute anything, but for Ken to go back to the Traffic Group and clarify the length of the study.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Dean and a second by Mr. Smith to table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. Item C is the developer for Arthur Heights is ready to move forward with engineering and has requested Garver to be the design engineers. These costs associated with the project will be financed through a bond and spread as special assessments against the benefiting lots. And so Garver's representatives are here to explain their work and answer any questions. And Mr. Lee, you're back up again. You just can't stay with him at that podium.
Well, good evening again, Ken Lee with Garver. We are working with Russell Ralph. He's the developer on the project, and the services on this, I did want to note that these are the infrastructure improvements that are going in to serve primarily the residential lots in the addition and to build the roadway and the pond. The other work on the site, the paving for the storage units and the construction of the storage units themselves will actually be done with a different site plan that has to be reviewed and approved by the city. So the improvements we're looking at today are only the water, sanitary sewer, stormwater sewer, and paving that would be the public infrastructure improvements on it. And then as Mayor Benaj pointed out earlier, these are assessed to the property owners. So the city finances it, but the residents who live in this addition are the ones who pay for it. The city at large doesn't have to carry the burden of that cost other than the financing of it, but all those costs are reimbursed through the special assessments as alluded to earlier. So.
Any questions or discussion on Arthur Heights improvement? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Dean, or Mr.
David.
David.
I'll make a motion to approve an agreement for professional services with Garver for design, construction, staking, construction administration, and construction observation services for the Arthur Heights in the amount of $110,900 and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. David and a second by Mr. Dean. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And that motion carries 5-0. And on to item D. So this item is supplemental agreement for professional services with Garver for extended their construction engineering services for the Woodlawn project. So this item was tabled at our last meeting to allow staff to determine what needs to be completed on Woodlawn and how many inspection days will be required. Due to the new completion schedule from KDOT, Garver felt will have less days and have submitted a revised agreement reflecting those changes. So Chris Bone, I don't see Chris, but as you see Mr. Pat Herman with Garver to explain the changes and answer any questions. Mr. Herman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City staff. I appreciate your time. Yeah, we had a presentation last time. There won't be a presentation this time. Just we're hearing from the contractor that they're expecting an accelerating schedule up till October 12th is what they're telling us. It is an accelerated schedule. So what we would anticipate is if the contractor does work past that schedule, because they do technically have the working days to work past. If they do work past that, we would have to come back up here and go for supplemental number 2. Just want to be clear on that. So we saw that end date, even though it is a working day project, the contractor giving an end date for us is how we were able to kind of collapse that supplemental request. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Herman?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean?
I did have a question, Pat. When you talked with the contractor about the date they gave you on the accelerated schedule, what scope they have left to complete? You don't have to tell me all those little things, but what's that look like? What's the total to complete scope wise on the schedule?
So it essentially would be everything left on the project that's open. They would have all of their roadside improvements, the pavement complete. The project would, for all intents and purposes, be complete. And I understand that there would really, beyond that point, there would be very little, if any, cleanup beyond that point.
So it would be fair to say the biggest milestones are finishing the traffic light, getting the asphalt down and getting the striping done?
Yeah, yes. And the roadside improvements, all the sod,
Okay.
there's a litany of other small items that need to be completed, but yeah, those are the big ones.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
I don't necessarily have any questions, but I do have some comments on this. I'm not quite sure how to vote on this one, and kind of the reason why is last time I asked the question about these extra working days. This construction observation is to pay for these additional working days that have been approved. And I said, hey, when's that change order going to come before the council to approve these working days? And Garver told us that we'll change order 11, approve those working days. I asked Maria to help me look into that. And it turns out we did approve a change order 11, but it wasn't for additional working days. It was for a different aspect of the project. And so the additional working days is KDOT change order 11, not Bel Aire change order number 11. And KDOT change order 11 has never come before this council for approval. Those working days haven't been approved by this council. Through further conversations with Maria, I've come to understand that KDOT approved those additional working days. And per our contract with them, If KDOT determines something is reasonable, or if it's reasonable and prudent to move forward with something and it has cost with it, the city is supposed to approve it. My concern is that I don't understand how we got to a point where these additional working days were reasonable and prudent. Everyone who's driven by Woodlawn for the entire course of the project has seen a lack of progress, a lack of working on the project. It's been a perpetual frustration for the city. And more importantly, the contractor sets the schedule. They're in charge of their schedule. They're in charge of setting what the controlling item is for the project. And I understand they had to wait on some things, but they're the contractor who sets the schedule, who should have set those things as the controlling item. And they should have not been charging working days when they were waiting on that. They made the decision to progress the work and to continue to charge working days. And so my concern with kind of proceeding with this is, one, this council hasn't approved the working days that this construction observation is for. It's possible that maybe KDOT can somehow overrule that and still make it happen. But I kind of feel like we're not doing our job as a council if we're not doing everything that we can to hold the contractor accountable for the contract to get the project done on the schedule. And I don't feel like we've done that yet. So that's kind of where I'm at on this one.
Thank you. Ms. Schrock, would you like to weigh in on that a little bit? Because I think there's some legal implications there that Mr. Smith has addressed.
In the agreement, it specifically states that when we signed, that we were giving KDOT the authority to make decisions regarding additional working days. They do, after speaking with KDOT and chief engineers who are veterans and have been with KDOT for quite a time, their comment is they are aware that sometimes municipalities do not agree with their granting or their approving or their authorizing of additional working days. That being said, the engineers shared that what they look at, as Justin Smith talked about, was a reasonable and prudent standard. They are administrating the agreement. They are distributing the funds. They use their basis as engineers to make a decision. Is it truly reasonable and prudent for the contractor, for the engineer to ask for additional time? If they believe it is, then they're going to add that additional working day. They want to make sure that everyone is paid appropriately. That is their primary duty, in addition to many other duties in the agreement. But Justin Smith was accurate in everything that was said, because we've had this discussion. There is a appeal process that we could follow. That appeal process would be the council saying we disagree with the number of additional working days for whatever reasons. That would then go through the KDOT process and would eventually go to the secretary of the Kansas Department of Transportation. They would review any information we have and make a decision as to whether grant it still or maybe change it to less. But as for that change order, number 11, which discusses, the KDOT change order with the number of days, they have made a decision on it already. But we're not the first municipality to have any questions about it.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
The concern that I have is that this could be a situation where the squeaky wheel is getting the attention. You know, if the contractor complains about it loud enough and long enough, they're more annoying than we are. And KDOT doesn't have skin in the game. They're not writing a bigger check but through approving this. And so I think we have to do whatever we can to, protect the interest of the taxpayers and not overspend on this. And that's my chief concern.
I will add, and I'll ask Mr. Lasher to please weigh in on this, but that request from the contractor was for like 120 days, I think it was, or 127 days. It was much bit more days than what was approved. We actually spoke with KDOT, Mr. Lasher and I did, and told them our concerns of allowing all those extra days. And they came back with, I think, 57 days is what they've approved. I think it was. So, but that's the last I've heard of that discussion is that that's where it landed. So if you'd like to elaborate on that, please do.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor. We heard that they were asking for additional days, 100 and some, and so the mayor and I had a Zoom meeting with several KDOT officials and told them we didn't agree with anything. We didn't think any of it should be approved because, as Mr. Smith stated, that we'd seen people not working, and why are they doing this? And basically they told us that they would review our comments, review the requests of the contractor, and then let everybody know. And I think it was maybe a month later or a couple of weeks later anyway, they came back and told us that they were granting them 50 some days or whatever. So
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, so is that the official appeals process that Ms. Schrock was referring to?
yeah, I don't know that I think that was probably our disagreement, and maybe I think the appeal that Maria's talking about is maybe we should, after we heard that, maybe we should have then appealed to the secretary or whoever's the next level and said, well, we don't agree with the 57. But I don't, that's what I'm not sure.
So Marie, is it game over, or is there a way we can push back at this point through that process?
They approved it. Now I can't tell you what day it was approved, but they did acknowledge it was approved, that they did an analysis of it. They also did mention, as Councilmember Justin Smith mentioned, they understand that by adding additional working days, there are additional costs that accrue and get added to the city. So it makes sense to them that a municipality would be frustrated with additional working days. But again, their response is they have to follow the standard of reasonable and prudent. They have to work with all of the parties, whether that's construction, whether that's engineering. They have to do that analysis. And that analysis is absolutely based upon their experience, their expertise. But they commented that they understood that municipalities would disagree.
It seems to me, I recall in the discussions with KDOT that they actually pulled Garver's notes on working days and to see what was being accomplished on what days. I don't know if you remember doing that or somebody else did that with Garver, but they're monitoring the project, so they're the ones who say, yeah, those days are should be charged or should not be charged. So I do know that they reviewed that portion.
Did we receive an analysis from KDOT on how they applied the standard of reasonable and prudent?
No, we didn't. We just got word from them basically that they would approve the additional days. What, our city engineer, Ann, did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Smith, we did receive an analysis from KDOT, and it was either a letter or an email. I know it came to me. I believe Mr. Lasher was involved. This was back in, I believe, April, May timeframe. I looked at it fairly recently. I can find it and submit it to Mr. Lasher, and he can submit it to the rest of the council, so you have an idea of their basis for granting the working days.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Amber.
So our options, if that is KDOT's final decision and they've submitted their analysis and we didn't approve this, then we would be out of KDOT specifications and risk losing funding. Am I understanding that correctly?
We did agree to those terms. That was the role we agreed to share, that we would do certain things, but their analysis is absolute. The only other thing that they allow is the appeal process. I don't believe we've officially used that appeal process. It would be something available to us. As Ann just mentioned, this 57 days goes back a few months, but anything coming up going forward we could take advantage of that formal appeal process.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
So the time period for leveraging the appeals process has now passed.
For the 57 days that occurred months ago, that is officially completed. That is what one
Because
of
the
the
appeal
chief,
process has to happen before it is officially completed.
I think it would need to be very, very close. I'm not going to say the exact same day at the exact same moment, but with being a couple of months out, that was already decided. And one of the chief, golly, I can't remember his name. One of the chief engineers went back to go review notes to have the conversation with us. When they went back to review the notes, they shared what their analysis was. And it was, everything was in the past tense. This is what occurred. This is how we acted. Now going forward, we can tell you a little bit more about the appeal process, which is actually shared in one of their standards and specifications manual. It goes into detail as to what that process is in case there are any disagreements.
Well, I know this is, I think, our first KDOT project. It probably won't be our last, although I do wonder if the money has been worth it, if it's actually saved the taxpayers any money. I'm not 100% sure. We probably should do analysis on that. But I think understanding that appeals process in detail for when this comes up again is probably to our benefit. So at a minimum, we need to do that.
Yeah, I think one of those, that's a lesson learned. I think we should definitely do something like that if we do any more of these projects. Which looks like we will, but I don't have that crystal ball either. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Dean.
Yeah, I mean, I share the frustrations with everybody else. Part of the difficulty of understanding it is timing, right? I think the first time we heard about this was when I added up the days that were left on a job, and this is probably 6 months ago, and they weren't adding up. I was like, how is this going to work? Are you saying you're going to be over 2 months? And then was revealed that there had been a process going on for some time. It had dated back to last year. And so it does, as frustrating as it is, it does kind of feel like we lost our opportunity to petition, or whatever we would call it, appeal KDOT. And unfortunately, it does feel like it's maybe a tough lesson to learn. But I'm also a little bit concerned with getting the project done before the winter weather hits. And I do understand that the services that Garver provide are important, and that if we want to finish the project, that we do need them to help us finish the project. So as frustrated as I am about the whole thing, I'm going to motion to approve an agreement for professional services with Garver for design, construction, staking, construction administration, and construction observation services. Oh, I skipped over, I think, for the Woodlawn project in the amount of $125,464.95, and authorize the mayor to sign. And I think I need to amend it because I started reading the one right above it, and it included some verbiage that wasn't included in
Would
this
you like
line.
to just restate the motion?
I'll restate the motion. Sorry, Mayor.
That's fine.
I'll motion to approve a supplemental agreement for professional services with Garver for extending the construction engineering services for the Woodlawn project in the amount of $125,464.95, and authorize the mayor to sign.
A motion by Mr. Dean. Do we have a second? Hearing no second, this motion will die if we. I will declare the motion dead. Do we have a different motion?
Mr. Mayor, can I get clarification that about this proposed amount is not to exceed? Is there a chance, is there a reasonable chance that you could come in under this amount?
There is a reasonable chance. We're really kind of bound to the contractor's schedule and how they complete this work. If they came in here and knocked everything out tomorrow, then absolutely, but if they extend it out past that day, that's we're, like I say, we're very bound by the contractor's schedule. So it's very hard to, have that crystal ball but it is a not to exceed. This is not a lump sum supplemental request. So.
And this goes back to the whole premise of a working days contract. But even here with the accelerated schedule, they still have their official working days from KDOT, and they still get to manage their crews however they see fit. Correct?
Yes.
So they could actually go over this accelerated schedule, and that's where you're saying you'll have to come back for supplemental part 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. David.
beyond the days dispute, despite Garver's oversight, I don't think anybody in the city is happy with the quality of the work, with the quality of Woodlawn Road. My question is this a mandatory oversight, or is it optional to get the construction finished?
And do you know, that's a question I believe we talked with KDOT about.
As a requirement of accepting the federal funds, they do require a certain amount of oversight. In the contract that we had signed with KDOT, we certified that we provide oversight based on KDOT's guidelines. They have requirements as far as amount of testing required. They have requirements as far as if the contractor is doing this type of work, it needs to be observed. If we do not proceed with this agreement and Garver runs out of funds and they leave the site, then we are stuck with a non-observed project, which means that we could be in jeopardy of losing our federal funding.
I was hoping for a little more than could be.
It's probably not a could be in jeopardy of losing our federal funding. We would be very likely in jeopardy. I guess that there's a very strong possibility that they would be revoking some of it because we are not meeting our obligations under the agreement that we signed with KDOT several years ago.
So,
Mr. Mayor.
I would like to interject there. I'm not an attorney, but I did read those contracts, and the way I read it is you have to have this oversight. If you don't, you will lose the funding. But I will not tell you that's a good legal interpretation because I'm not an attorney. So, Mr. Smith.
I was just going to add a follow-up to Mr. David's question. Does the oversight have to be staffed and funded to the level that we've done up to this project, or is there a minimum viable observation level of staffing and observation that can be done to complete this project?
It really depends on the amount of work that is being done and the type of work that is being done. I have worked with Garver over the past weeks, months to make sure that their staffing is appropriate for the work that is being done. Being very conscious of not only, number one, the frustration with I'm not going to say quality of construction, but I'm going to say the results of the construction because we don't quite know what's going on yet. But I know there's a frustration there. I've worked with Garver to make sure that we have the appropriate level of staffing on site. They have not been on site. When there's been several times I've driven down and I have not seen a Garver vehicle either at the construction trailer or on site because there's not work going on that would necessitate them being on site. They have always been very prudent with their time in their work on other subdivision projects. They are always under budget. I have never seen a project that they have come right up to the maximum, even though it's a not to exceed budget and they never have. They've always been a fair amount under. So I'm very confident that they continue to provide a level of service that is adequate without going overboard.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Dean.
Ann might be able to answer this and Pat might be able to chime in. Can you speak a little bit to the motivation of the contractor to meet that accelerated schedule? Is there something, why are they shooting for that date rather than using the full amount? Is there some justification you can give us for why it's better for them to accelerate and get done? Is it weather related for the asphalt? Just kind of expand on why they'd be shooting for that accelerated date.
In my opinion, there's two pieces to that. Number one, just as with everybody else, they're very frustrated with this project, want to get it completed, want to get out. They do not want to waste their time and continually drag things out. They want to get their forces elsewhere. The other aspect is surface asphalt generally cannot be laid after October. The October timeframe is pretty much it. So that's the other reason for the accelerated schedule.
I want to be very clear, and I know that people have kind of talked around this, but in our mind, this is just a failed road, okay? I don't know why that is. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know that, but it is a failed road. And we're being asked to pay more money for a defective product. That is not, I understand that's not Garver. That's the overall, something happened. We don't know what that is. We're going to find out, and we're going to make a decision based on that. But that's the frustration. I think that is that plus the constant delays of seeing no activity, and that's just the level of frustration. It is very aggravating to everyone to see this. So I just want to be very clear about that, because it is not acceptable to, I do audits of quality systems all the time. I would never let this happen. I mean, I can't say, I don't know construction. That's not my background. My background is manufacturing. So I won't say I know what I'm talking about when it comes to construction, but in my world, we can't have this. Okay. And I don't think you can have it in the construction world either. Okay. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Amber.
I'm going to ask one last question. I know the answer to it, but it's to Mr. Smith's question. There is no possible way that we can do the oversight in-house because of hours and because of expertise. Is that right?
The KDOT requires certain qualifications and certain certifications, and there is nobody in-house that has those certifications.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. David.
I'll make a slightly amended motion to approve a supplemental agreement for professional services with Garver for extending their construction engineering services for the Woodlawn project in the amount not to exceed $125,464.95, and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Dean and a second by motion by Mr. David and a second by Mr. Dean. Any further discussion on this motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to vote for this because I don't see a way around it at this point to not risk our funding, but I'm not happy about my support of it.
Mr. Mayor, I second Emily's comments.
I agree.
If that wasn't
too.
already clear. I still have outstanding questions about the appeal process, and I do want to make sure that we do not have any further recourse there. I don't think approving this probably limits that recourse, but if we do have any opportunity to reopen that appeal on those working days, we should do that. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Welch, did you have a comment?
I was just inserting that I agree with all of this. This is a horrible fiasco. It's kind of like when you go to the hospital and you have no control over what they're doing to you and you end up with a $2 million bill. That's where we're at. And they may not even have helped you. You may die while you're there. And I think some people would think our road is dead.
Yeah. I understand. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. Move on to item E. So we discussed the Central Park pool at a workshop last week. Staff identified issues and presented options. The consensus was to move forward with the replaster. 3 quotes were received, and Brian Hayes, is Brian here? There he is, with the Recreation Center to discuss the project and bids and answer questions. Mr. Hayes.
Don't have much to add with that we haven't talked about already for the last year and a half. took what you guys talked about last week and kind of felt that the most feasible route at this point is to fix the surface that we have. These are the 3 quotes to fix that surface, and we're recommending taking the quote for $47,200 from Midwest Plastering out of Shawnee, Kansas.
Do we get the same term of guarantee on all of these?
Guarantee that we can put water in it, put people in it.
Well, I know during the discussion last week, I actually watched it, even though I wasn't here.
There are some
different
warranties, but it's
guarantees
basically with the product and the workmanship.
And my question then again is, do these different companies offer us basically the same term of warranty? So they're all 5
certainly.
years or 10 years, or what is the term?
The Midwest is a 2-year, Mid-America Pool renovation is 5-year.
So what really comes down to is lowering our amortized costs for several years. And if the pool shifts, all bets are off.
And it's hard to warranty that. I mean, if it's a groundwater issue, they're not going to warranty it. I mean, they will warranty the surface and the product and the workmanship. That's all that's going to be warranted.
Right.
They will warranty if that crack that we showed in that picture, they're going to fix that crack. So they will warranty that work.
That was my next question.
Yes.
Were they going to fix the crack?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I feel like we talked about this a lot at the workshop, and I'm supportive of the plastering option with the 2-year warranty. I don't think an additional $20,000 for a 3-year warranty that may or may not actually be for the issues that we would encounter is probably worth it. So I'll make a motion to accept the quote from Midwest Plaster LLC in the amount not to exceed $47,200 for repair and plastering of the Central Park pool, and authorize the mayor to sign all related documents.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Smith, a second by Mr. David. Any additional questions or discussions?
I'll just interject that I agree about the warranty. It's not worth an extra $30,000 or $20,000 for something that may not cover anything.
I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
On to item F. So staff was able to negotiate purchase of right-of-way needed from Envision Management for the 53rd Street reconstruction project from Oliver to Woodlawn. I understand there are a couple of more right-of-ways to be secured before we can let the contract on this rebuild project. So are there any questions of our city attorney concerning this agreement?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
making motion to approve the receipt of right-of-way from Envision Management LLC for the 53rd Street reconstruction project, and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Smith and second by Mr. Dean. Any discussions or questions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. I'm going to request a 15-minute executive session for discussion under attorney-client privilege, and we should invite our city engineer, city attorney, city manager, and our assistant city manager. Somebody would like to make that motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith,
what was the subject of the executive session?
attorney-client privilege.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session for the sole purpose of discussion for the subject of attorney-client privilege pursuant to KSA 75-4319 exception. Invite the city manager, the city attorney, and the city engineer in. The meeting will be for a period of 15 minutes and will resume and the open meeting will resume in city council chambers at 9:05 p.m.
Would you please include the assistant city manager?
Oh, and amend it to include the assistant city manager as well.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Hamburg. Do we
Second.
have a second? Second by Mr. David.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
I feel like in the past, we've been advised that the subject needs to be different than the exception when we make our motions for attorney-client that the subject should not be attorney-client privilege? I just want to make sure our motion is fine here.
Our motion is fine.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're in executive session for 15 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We held an executive session and no binding action was taken. Ready to move on to item 14, discussion of future issues. Anyone have any additional issues to discuss or future issues to mention? Hearing none, I'll move on to adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to adjourn.
Mr. David, second? And a motion by Mr. David, second by Ms. Hamburg. Any no discussion allowed? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0.